Hi, everyone. So just to introduce myself, I'm Ricardo, very excited to be here in this conference. And I'm software engineer at Grover, working mostly in TypeScript products and GraphQL. And we also work with some database optimizations. And that's about me.
Hey everyone, happy Prisma Day. My name is Vasil, I'm a software engineer and I'm one of the co-founders at Panther. So what is Panther? I would say that one good thing probably that came out of COVID is that a lot more people and organizations are recognizing that talent is everywhere. It's not confined to a single country or a region. And because we know this, having our own internal team being distributed and remote, what we do at Panther is take care of all the legal work from compliance with local laws, payroll to taxes and benefits on behalf of our clients so that they can hire the best people globally in whatever country. This matters not just because employees want to find flexible and remote jobs, but because the traditional way of employing people internationally is too expensive and time consuming. To give just a quick example, if you want to hire person X in country Y, you would have to set up initially a subsidiary in country Y, learn all there is to know, like all the details about local laws, compliance, track all the changes, spend literally tens of thousands of dollars into banking fees, deposits, guarantees, and all of that, which can take months. And all of these, like even before you have to hire before you even get to hiring the person. So Panther eliminates all of that because we automated payroll and compliance in one single platform. All the client has to do is add a new hire to the platform, and from that point on, within minutes, we move on to drafting and onboarding the employee. And when the time comes for the whole team to get paid, with a single click in every local currency, everyone gets paid immediately. So if I had to summarize the whole thing, I would say that we are really on a mission to help companies champion talent over location. Thank you.
So hi everyone, I'm Émile. I hope you have a wonderful Prisma Day. I'm a freelance DevOps and backend developer, so I help clients build and make their system into production on various stacks. And one of them lately has been more GraphQL and Prisma 2. And I've been an active member of the community of Prisma. I've contributed a lot to, sometimes to the code base and finding bugs, reporting issues. And I'm really excited by this technology. I'm really passionate about it. So I'm really happy to be on this panel to discuss my experience of making it into production and helping the other developers be productive with it. What are the pitfalls? What are the good things? And why I decided to use Prisma. So I hope this will be informative for you, and as it will be almost for me to meet all my co-panelists, and I hope you have a good day.
Thank you, Émile, Ricardo, and Vasil. It's a pleasure having you all here today. We will start this panel with some quick, fun yes or no questions for which you have the yes. Could you raise the yes for me? And you also have the no. Could you raise the no for me? So the way it works is I will ask the question. As soon as you hear the question, you raise whether you answer yes or no. Are you all ready for this?
Absolutely. Yes.
Okay, great. Let's get started then. So first question, have you ever pushed a breaking change to production? Okay. Will machines rule the world one day? Okay, Vasil is a bit torn. Monolith before microservices. Is daylight savings time a good idea? Okay, next question. Are giant spiders worse than giant chickens?
Oh, yes.
Okay, next question. If tomatoes are fruits, does that make ketchup a smoothie?
Yeah.
Okay, next question. Goats make great pets, yes or no? Next question. Is Switzerland too perfect? Okay. Final question. Is a picture really worth 1,000 words? All right. Thank you so much. I feel like we got the vibes moving. Let's get
I
into
feel
some...
like I need to elaborate on some of these, but
Yes, please. Feel free to. Maybe we can do a round of the most controversial question that you found from all of these.
Yes, some of them were controversial.
the chickens thing is going to haunt me probably.
Yeah.
Ricardo, what was your most controversial yes/no question?
Oh, that about Switzerland, I had to think a little bit, but yeah, definitively we don't have any perfect places yet. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the most controversial is monolith versus microservices. That you can start a flaming war between any two technologies.
Okay, I think we're ready to get some more serious questions. So, Ricardo, I have the opening question for you, and I'd love to sort of like hear your thoughts and the rest of you. What are your highest priorities right now in your company or even personal projects?
Yes, sure. So at Grover, the highest priority right now is growth and acquiring. So a lot of our initiatives at the moment is in the direction of performance and scalability. And in this way, GraphQL is helping us a lot to define our architecture, to be faster, to improve our architecture, and all our initiatives also in front end and infrastructure, everything related to performance and scalability is our goal at the moment.
Got it. Anyone else wants to chime in on this?
Yeah, I would agree. Like performance and security on my end are among the top priorities internally, as well as hiring and expanding the team. Which coincidentally, Prisma, the questions around Prisma are one of the interview questions, and yeah, we do ask people to read up if they haven't worked on or with the platform before.
Got it.
It's an interesting. I think productivity is definitely an important point also for me. And because of this, I usually work with smaller clients. So the goal is mostly to ship an MVP or ship a product or features fast, because we only have like a couple of developers and we don't have a lot of time for that to ship. And one other thing is also like I've been working mostly with type-safe languages from mostly unsafe types languages before, and I think type safety allows us to also ship faster code. So type safety is definitely important for us, and from a design and just like if you need to do refactoring. So yeah, those are the two things.
And what is one tech industry trend that you recommend or that you have embraced?
Yeah, that's also a good question. And I think it goes also with the typing thing, that I think TypeScript, and I think we all agree probably that TypeScript is a big trend that is replacing a lot of JavaScript in libraries and commercial code base also, because of the type safety. The compile times type safety reduces the amount of stuff that breaks at runtime, and it's just easier to work with that code. You don't need as big of a mental model when you work with TypeScript code, because you know your input, you know your output, and you just have to figure out if you need to refactor the middle. So it's much easier than just like trying to figure out what the hell you got an input and what you need to return to your caller and all that stuff. So and I think it goes with the Prisma ecosystem really well because of the emphasis on type safety.
Yeah, I totally agree in this point. I also see the industries going toward these static typing possibilities, or if it's not originally a static typing language, like a dynamic language. We are providing ways to type our code. So, for example, TypeScript for JavaScript, and we have also other cases like Ruby and Python that they have in last versions the possibility of typing the code as well. And yeah, I love also the example of Rust, because Rust uses the compiler even to identify memory allocations. So it saves only not only the coding, like auto-completion, all this stuff, but the memory allocation as well. So you can identify problems in your code in terms of memory, what is amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing I would add quickly to that, without starting a war, is that we have embraced microservices and sort of a domain-driven approach to designing our platform. And on the operational side, I would just add that we're also fully remote and distributed. So that's kind of a big thing happening everywhere. No central office, no hub, no nothing, just everyone working anywhere they want.
Thank you for all the insightful answers. The next question is, what are the biggest problems that Prisma solved for you?
A bit again on the type safety, and I guess it goes with having this single schema, right? That you used to before. You use either to do your migration and then recreate that in the model, so you have both in sync, or you do your models and then generate your migration from it, and then with Prisma, you have this single place, and then you have the single schema, and then it automatically generates the model for you, and then automatically generates the migration for you that you can tweak on the migration side if you need. But mostly that's really interesting because you keep them in sync. You don't have a choice. You never go out of sync with your database, and if you followed all the steps correctly, but it's really harder to be out of sync with your database. And then you also get, with the type safety, you get a compile time error for every places that now is using it wrongly. So you have much less possibility for a runtime error, and code, especially for code paths that are less used or really infrequently used. So you might not even if it was a runtime error, it could take a week before you detect it, because you never it's a one call, and then but that call is important, but if it breaks, you just don't see it after a week. So that, I think, is the most important thing I got from Prisma to compared to other ORM out there for the JS ecosystem.
Yeah,
sorry, go on.
I also agree, and in our case is mostly the productivity of using a toolkit to access the database, right? So the typings everywhere, it helps a lot, and the easy migrations. So working in different branches, and you have the Prisma reset, just get the right state to continue your feature. So it really helps the day work using Prisma. And also the Prisma Studio, sometimes it's handy just to have a place to put your data there. So it's everything. I would say that for me, most important is the typings, and all the other features. It's just aggregating to this excellent tool.
Yeah, Ricardo kind of beat me to it on the productivity, and I was going to say that, as well as I would just add time to market, because for a startup, it's very important to roll out your MVP or get to your first user base. And with Prisma doing literally all the heavy lifting for us, and just plugging into the API and utilizing all the functionalities and resources, it's been really easy to get from first line of code to MVP in no time.
Thank you for all the answers. Moving on to the next question, what role does caching play in your architecture?
Ooh, okay, I'll take this one. The short answer would be very important. Longer answer without going into too much like technical details. I would say like performance is one of our main drivers, as I imagine for a lot of organizations and people. So we're still experimenting on like different methods of caching and have gone through several iterations, both on the front end and back end. On the front end, utilizing even stuff like hashing validations and everything that goes with that. And starting like with even simple stuff like utilizing a CDN. I would say on the back end, there's been a lot of debate around, our use of like Redis versus something else, and whether caching should take more of a database layer versus application layer approach, and what the benefits or pitfalls are between both. But overall, it's of the utmost importance because it boosts performance, scalability, and above all availability, especially in a microservices based architecture. If like one node or something goes offline, you still have that sort of a caching layer to rely on to still provide the service.
It's an interesting topic and definitely evolving. I also think like caching is multiple layers. You have like more edge caching from the front end, and you have like all those clients like Apollo client that does a bit of caching on its own, and then you have like more edge like GraphCDN that just got launched today. Actually, I just received an email. You have GraphCDN, StepZen, WonderGraph, all those types of middlewares that can like cache on the edge. And then most importantly for like the Prisma side is like if you're doing a GraphQL API is like data loaders pattern. I think we didn't touch on that, but like that's really an important pattern for GraphQL. For REST, it's less of a problem. And then also like you eventually will probably have Prisma layers that's going to do some caching too. I'm excited to see what's going to happen there. There's already a bit of batching, but not much more than that. So yeah, I think it's a multifaceted problem. And also like I've seen a lot of people say like you can't cache on GraphQL servers, but that's not true. And we're starting to see that it's just a different way of caching than we're used to.
Yeah, I totally agree. This batch loadings to optimize the querying database, it's really handy. It helps a lot. And the possibilities to cache in the front end side using what you said, like Apollo client and React query and all these things that provide us easy way to cache our data. It's really amazing, right?
Yeah, the data loaders comment was spot on. Like we do utilize that, and I skipped it for some reason.
That's why we have a panel.
Absolutely.
Okay, so moving on, I think some of you have already spoken about the role of GraphQL. So I'd like to open this next question with, how do you approach building GraphQL APIs with Prisma?
Yeah, that's a good question. In our case, we are using GraphQL Federation and Apollo Gateway as a single endpoint, right? So in this way, we can create our subgraphs, our services behind of this gateway. And it means that in our case, we have different architectures running in the same graph, I would say. So we are free to create new projects and decide on the architecture, the language that we want, and in the end, it will be just attached to this main graph. And in this way, we can grow faster. We can create more features. We are more decoupled, and in the end, it helps to deliver it faster to our clients. So that's what it's really handy in our case. You
want to go, or I could just
no
say...
argument. Ricardo just covered 95% of like what I was going to say. So, like basically just this.
I would add a few things maybe on there's an interesting thing right now. It's like, Apollo is pushing hard on their federation spec, but you also have the guild with schema stitching on the other side. And I think that is going to caught on more and more this year. I'm expecting that schema stitching will be more popular in the end than Federation, because it's better integrated, in my opinion. It's just easier, and you have like for example, if you want to do like Federation with a code first approach with Nexus or type GraphQL, it's still clunky, not really well integrated, and that's mostly a fault of Apollo, that they're not using really standard stuff technically. Like, I don't want to get into the technical detail, but I like it's pretty. Yeah, well, yeah, it's just like they're using those annotations that are not really well supported back in annotations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to just add the point that is really nice. In our case, we have projects using Nexus and Nest.js, and so having these different approaches, in the end, we don't have a lot of problems using Graphql Federation, but we do have sometimes some conflicts that we need to solve. So I totally agree that there are other ways to solve and stitch the graphs together. In our case, I would say that it works good, but I'm always looking to other options. That's really amazing to have more options that we always learn with these new possibilities, right?
I agree. And I think we're going to see a lot more push on the code first approach versus, well, that's my opinion. Well, like I don't see like the schema first approach scaling as well for a larger organization. And then it's also like you can build better tooling around code first approach for connections and reusable components like that. So yeah, I'm expecting we're going to see more and more of that.
Yeah, and our experience there, for me, code first is much better, like having the code like generated for you. And we are focused only in one language. We don't need to really create all the GraphQL language as well. So for us, it really helps a lot. So we had a project that we started in SDL first, and all options, next options were like using the code first, and it was much better in our case.
For the code first approach, what were you using, Ricardo, if I may ask?
Yeah, code first, we have Nexus, Nest. We have also some other languages using some generated tools. For example, Ruby, there is a gem that generates the code as well. And only one project using TypeScript that we started SDL first, but I would say that is harder to maintain, like in terms of creating interfaces, all this stuff. I would say that is better to have it generated and focus on the code. My experience that it's faster in development terms speaking, it's better.
I see. And sort of moving on to the next question, it was quite a nice sort of detour on GraphQL, even going beyond just the actual construction of GraphQL schemas, and speaking about, you know, like actually bringing together multiple services that have a subgraph into one sort of consolidated graph and the different techniques there, federation, stitching, and so on. So sort of moving on from there and back to something that is a bit closer to Prisma and choosing technologies. So the question is, what are some of the factors that you considered when investigating and choosing to use Prisma?
Okay, there's a sort of a theme developing over the course of this panel of type safety and microservices, like for which I'm guessing, advocating. So I would, without like reiterating everything that was said in terms of type safety and using TypeScript, I would just like reinforce our decision by saying that having like a microservice-based architecture and relying on a lot of internal APIs, Prisma and the type safety that it provides, it kind of guarantees that the data and the shape of the data that gets funneled through like the main GraphQL API on our end is valid and is of a specific shape. Because specifically speaking for our product, runtime verification of the shape of the data is like a big no-no. So having Prisma, the advanced guide types that's on your website as well, like the documentation, utilizing that part along with extending on those types, as well as TypeScript overall was one of the main reasons that we love and use Prisma. But on the operational side, I would just have to say that I did a lot of investigation into like the support by its creators, like if it's something that's here to stay that we can rely on in the long run, and all of that, as well as the community, which I think is a very important factor in like when choosing or diving into any new technology that you're trying to adopt or switching to a technology, as well as what I just mentioned, the documentation itself. So it kind of ticked like all the checkboxes on our end, and we've been loving it ever since.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. Really, it spun up like, I don't think Prisma 1 was really that popular compared to like Prisma 2 from what I've seen, and I've heard about Prisma like starting from Prisma 2. So for me, the real choice was, I don't like ORMs because I've seen too much problems going with ORM. Like you load the whole object, you change one property, and then you hit save. You don't really know what's gonna be changed, and it's all a bit magic, and I don't really like that. But it's also like, it's a kind of a query builder, but simpler. So it goes really, like you don't have to think really about the SQL. You do have to think about a SQL that is generated in the end a bit, because it's going to impact performance. So you do need to think about it, but like it's, for most of the time you can like forget about it, and then at least get your feature ready, and then you can optimize it later on. And I think that's the sweet spot that Prisma is on right now. And I talked a bit about like not having to write models before, and I think that's also like nice to have. And I agree on everything that Vasil said on the documentation, that is like quite good, and community and just commercial support, that we know that there's actually a commercial entity behind it. So it's
interesting you mentioned the documentation, because in our case, because we are creating these new graphs, no? We have the possibility to start with a different stack, and we were analyzing possibilities for ORMs, and so what we have in TypeScript ecosystem, right? And when I saw, and we were analyzing, we saw the documentation about the comparison documentation that Prisma has. It was very interesting to analyze and really see what will be the benefits that compared to the tools that we are using right now. And the fact of having the typings everywhere, like already built in this toolkit, was a really really high decision. Like it really helped our decision to choose Prisma. So this typings and possibilities of having this easy migration. So we were in production with the Prisma migration, not the final version yet. So it was like a previous version. But everything was very smooth. We didn't have any problems with it. So it was really right decision. And yeah, we are always looking to continue creating new products, and Prisma is really it's the first option. When I see some products being created, I will just analyze this possibility.
Thank you. We have one final question. What are you most excited about in the Prisma roadmap?
Yeah, I'm gonna be quick since we don't have a lot of time yet. I say the NAPI binding stabilization of that is gonna bring a lot of performance back into Prisma. The Cascade support, that has been a long-awaited thing that's finally gotten some good going. And what I'm really most excited is the custom extensible part of Prisma, like custom validation, custom typing for JSON, stuff like that. versus datetime, locks on datetime. If we could use the locks on datetime, I would be really happy, and stuff like that.
I would agree with that, and I would say the being able to split the Prisma schema file into multiple files is high on my priority list.
Yeah, in my case, would be the Prisma migration field renames that will help a lot the developer to identify when it's dropping the column or not. So when it loses the data, I'm very excited to Nexus plugin Prisma because I really like the Nexus idea, the minimalist idea of this tool, and also the serverless Prisma Bootstrap is something that I'm also excited.
Well, it's been a real pleasure speaking to all of you and hearing sort of your different angles on Prisma. On that note, I would like to thank you all, and we'll now move to a live Q&A.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you very much.
We're now back for a live Q&A. Quick reminder again that you can post your questions in the Prisma Day channel on Slack. Now, let's get right into it. And I'd like to open up this question with the following. What challenges do you face when working with multiple databases in your architecture? And I would love for you, maybe, Ricardo, to open up this question with an answer.
Of course, yes, really nice question. Yeah, so we do have case of multi-databases, but maybe it's not the context because this is a legacy project that we have, and it's not GraphQL oriented. But what we do to solve this kind of multiple database is that because we are using GraphQL Federation, we have subgraphs that is different systems, and they end up having different databases. And then we extend entities using the Graphql Federation. And this is kind of a join between different databases. So it's how we are solving these issues or problems, or just a nice way to have stitched entities together, and providing the graph or what the front end needs, right, in terms of data that we have in different databases. So that's how we are solving this problem. Yeah, so.
I think it's a general good practice anyway to not have multiple services connecting to the same database, because if you change the schema, then potentially breaks multiple applications. So in general, it's like, because if you all connect to the same database, you effectively have like a distributed monolith instead of having real microservices that talk to each other.
I see. And moving on, we touched a bit on microservices. So using microservices gives you a scaling advantage, but comes at an operational cost. How do you sort of handle things like inter-service communication, for example, in situations where you need information in one service from another? Perhaps you could chime in on this, Vasil.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good question, actually. At the very basic level, I would say two things. Log everything. I feel like there's no such thing as an overkill when it comes to logging everything that happens on a microservice, in a microservice-based architecture, just because of like the way the system is distributed, and each module, each entity or unit exists as an ecosystem on its own. And another thing when it comes to messaging, whether you decided like that should be synchronous or asynchronous, the way the microservices communicate between each other is, and this is more of a general approach, I would say don't limit yourself to a single solution of communication, meaning experiment whatever works best for you. Like, use a request response for one microservice maybe, or notifications for a different one, publish, subscribe for a third one, or whatever. So don't be afraid to model the communication and everything that happens according to your system's needs, and just based on someone else's solution as canon or as like, you know, the ultimate design. But at the heart of it all, I would say log and log. You cannot go wrong that.
And try to have like a request ID that you can follow from the customer.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. You did. Yeah. Sorry, that was like, you know, that was,
it's like obvious, but like
for the novice developers and the junior developers, I would say, yeah, you have to work within the universal scope of IDs that something that you're using across the microservices does not repeat, or it's universally like unique. On
terms of security, I would say like usually people start with like the service is basically an admin of every other service, so you can fetch like every data you want. But like later on, it's better to have some kind of like a service A requests a token and says, well, I'm having this request from this client and I need to access that data from another service. So you can like more restrict that on. It's more of a know what flow where every service say I'm impersonating for this user, and so if this user doesn't have access, then the service can't have access, because otherwise it will make no sense, or the access pattern.
Yeah, we can definitely discuss security for a long time there. Like, but you're absolutely right. Security is something you can manage both on like user role or service role, as well as like scope within that role, just so that you'll be able to fetch different pieces of data or chunks of data depending on which service has access to which other service on behalf of what user. But yes, you're absolutely right. Yeah.
So we saw how this quickly turned into an interesting discussion around security. And Émile, I sort of want to do a follow-up question. How do you, more broadly speaking, how do you approach security as an application grows?
Yeah, it's an interesting topic and always evolving. I would say like at first I'm working a lot with GraphQL APIs, and usually I put a lot of logic at first in the GraphQL, like GraphQL Shield or something like that there. And then as the application grows, usually you turn to more like on the GraphQL side, you only have scope. So the user has access to writing post, but then the actual object that is written is like more dependent on the context. So you push down the context of who's asking for that resource, or who's asking to modify that resource. And then it's more in the business logic that you have to verify that the user really has access. And Facebook pattern, like if you take a look at what Facebook did a post a while ago on GraphQL, and they have this model where every time they request an object or write to an object, they verify the ownership of that object with the caller of the function, basically using the GraphQL context. So that's my approach, really.
I see. So basically, injecting basically the requester ID or some universal identifier about the user who's making the request, and then using that essentially in the different layers in order to.
And usually it's really, if you're lucky, you can like just by the object itself know if the user owns that object, but usually you have to go a parents or two parents up. So that's why data loaders also with like caching can help, because then if you already loaded those parents, you don't have to query the database again. So yeah, but like, yeah, usually you have to check in the business logic because it doesn't scale to put everything in the GraphQL layer at a bigger scale.
I see. And what is one of the most important lessons that you've learned when working with databases?
Yeah, I really like this question. I really consider the importance of having the constraints. So we can have, of course, validations in application level, but we shouldn't forget these constraints in a database. So it's very important for the consistent, right? So usually database has this problem with consistency, and it keeps the consistency, or at least a bit. What I also learned that is very important, the right indexes for the tables, right? And sometimes partial indexes also important to define in a database. So just a quick example, sometimes we add some soft deletes to our application, and it can completely destroy all the index that we have before, because if this delete at, for example, is always included to the SQL query, and we are not considering it in our index. It's just not taking the right index. So that's what I mean. And cascade delete also to keep the consistency is also important to have this ability of defining the cascade delete. And very important, don't forget your tech debts.
Got it.
Yeah. The most important thing I learned is null is not equal null in SQL. That's something that every junior database engineer will learn painfully.
Okay, we had one question from Robert in the Slack channel, and he asked if you found any places where you had to break out of Prisma and write raw SQL. Is this something which you think Prisma can solve in the future, or will there always be use cases for raw SQL in ORMs like Prisma? I'd love to.
I write quite a lot of it for statistics.
Yeah, I was going to say analytics. Yep.
Yeah, analytics and statistics, complex queries that require like generating series of data and then merging that series with other data and like per day sales or whatever. That's where what I would like Prisma to do is like, because now you can kind of parse SQL with TypeScript because it's like Turing complete TypeScript. So I think you could have a parser there that would be really helpful, or at least the basic.
I see, in order to basically verify template screens. Okay. Vasil, Émile, and Ricardo, I would like to greatly thank you for joining and sharing your experiences working with Prisma in production, and I hope to see you soon.
Absolutely.
Thanks
for having us.
Yes.